August pragmatism. August 1st. Don't go expecting perfection. That cucumber is bitter, so toss it out. There are thorns on the path, then keep away. Enough said. Why ponder the existence of nuisance? Such thinking would make you a laughingstock to the true student of nature, just as a carpenter or cobbler would laugh if you pointed out the sawdust and chips on the floors of their shops. Yet while those shopkeepers have dustbins for disposal, nature has no need of them. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, 8.50. We want things to go perfectly, so we tell ourselves that we'll get started once the conditions are right, or once we have our bearings. When, really, it'd be better to focus on making do with how things actually are. Marcus reminded himself, don't await the perfection of Plato's Republic. He wasn't expecting the world to be exactly the way he wanted it to be, but Marcus knew instinctively, as the Catholic philosopher Joseph Piper would later write, that he alone can do good who knows what things are like and what their situation is. Today, we won't let our honest understanding of the world stop us from trying to make the best of it. Nor will we let petty annoyances and minor obstacles get in the way of the important job we have to do. August 2nd. We can work anyway. Indeed, how could exile be an obstacle to a person's own cultivation, or to attaining virtue when no one has ever been cut off from learning or practicing what is needed by exile? Musonius Rufus, Lectures, 9.37.30, 31, 9.39.1 L8. In his life, after a surgery, Theodore Roosevelt was told he might be confined to a wheelchair for the remainder of his days. With his trademark ebullience, he responded, "All right. I can work that way too." This is how we can respond to even the most disabling turns of fate, by working within whatever room is left. Nothing can prevent us from learning. In fact, difficult situations are often opportunities for their own kinds of learning, even if they're not the kinds of learning we'd have preferred. Musonius Rufus, for his part, was exiled 3 times, twice by Nero and once by Vespasian, but being forcibly expelled from his life and his home didn't impinge on his study of philosophy. In his way, he responded by saying, "All right. I can work that way too." And he did, managing to squeeze in some time between exiles with a student named Epictetus, and thus helping to bring Stoicism to the world. August 3rd. The good life is anywhere at this moment. You aren't on a journey, but wandering about, being driven from place to place, even though what you seek to live well is found in all places. Is there any place more full of confusion than the Forum? Yet even there you can live at peace, if needed. Seneca, Oral Letters, 28.5b, 6. A well-known writer once complained that after becoming successful, wealthy friends were always inviting him to their beautiful, exotic houses. "Come to our home in the south of France," they would say. Or, "Our Swiss ski chalet is a wonderful place to write." The writer traveled the world, living in luxury, hoping to find inspiration and creativity in these inspiring manors and mansions. Yet it rarely happened. There was always the allure of another, better house. There were always distractions, always so many things to do, and the writer's block and insecurity that plagues creative types traveled with him wherever he went. We tell ourselves that we need the right setup before we finally buckle down and get serious. Or we tell ourselves that some vacation or time alone will be good for a relationship or an ailment. This is self-deceit at its finest. It's far better that we become pragmatic and adaptable, able to do what we need to do anywhere, anytime. The place to do your work, to live the good life, is here. August 4th. No blame, just focus. You must stop blaming God, and not blame any person. You must completely control your desire and shift your avoidance to what lies within your reasoned choice. You must no longer feel anger, resentment, envy, or regret. Epictetus, Discourses, March 22, 13. Nelson Mandela was imprisoned for resistance to the brutal apartheid regime in South Africa for 27 years. For 18 of those years, he had a bucket for a toilet, a hard cot in a small cell, and once a year he was allowed a single visitor for 30 minutes. It was vicious treatment meant to isolate and break down the prisoners. And yet, In spite of that, Mandela became a figure of dignity within the prison. Though he was deprived of many things, he still found creative ways to assert his will. As one of his fellow prisoners, Neville Alexander, explained on Frontline, Mandela always made the point, if they say you must run, insist on walking. If they say you must walk fast, insist on walking slowly. That was the whole point. We are going to set the terms. He pretended to jump rope and shadow box to stay in shape. He held his head higher than other prisoners, encouraged them when times got tough, and always retained his sense of self-assurance. That self-assurance is yours to claim as well. No matter what happens today, no matter where you find yourself, shift to what lies within your reasoned choices. Ignore, as best you can, the emotions that pop up, which would be so easy to distract yourself with. Don't get emotional, get focused. August 5th. Silence is strength. Silence is a lesson learned from the many sufferings of life. Seneca, Thyestes, 309 Ekel. The last time you said a really boneheaded thing, something that came back to bite you. Why did you say it? Chances are you didn't need to, but you thought doing so would make you look smart or cool or part of the group. The more you say, Robert Greene has written, the more likely you are to say something foolish. To that we add, the more you say, the more likely you are to blow past opportunities, ignore feedback, and cause yourself suffering. The inexperienced and fearful talk to reassure themselves. The ability to listen, to deliberately keep out of a conversation and subsist without its validity is rare. Silence is a way to build strength and self-sufficiency. August 6th. There is always more room to maneuver than you think. Apply yourself to thinking through difficulties. Hard times can be softened, tight squeezes widened, and heavy loads made lighter for those who can apply the right pressure. Seneca, on Tranquility of Mind, 10.4 bh. Have you ever been hopelessly losing a game that suddenly broke wide open and you won? Remember that time when you thought you were certain to fail the test, but with an all-nighter and some luck you managed to eke out a decent score? That hunch you pursued that others would have given up on that turned out brilliantly. It's that kind of energy and creativity and above all faith in yourself that you need right now. Defeatism won't get you anywhere, except defeat. But focusing your entire effort on the little bit of room, the tiny scrap of an opportunity, is your best shot. An aide to Lyndon Johnson once remarked that around the man there was a feeling if you did everything, you would win. Everything. Or as Marcus Aurelius put it, if it's humanly possible, you can do it. August 7th. Pragmatic and principled. Wherever a person can live, there one can also live well. Life is also in the demands of court, there too one can live well. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, 5.16. William Lee Miller, in his unique ethical biography of Abraham Lincoln, makes an important point about this famous president. Our deification of the man makes a point to pretend he wasn't a politician. We focus on his humble beginnings, his self-education, his beautiful speeches. But we gloss over his job, which was politics. That misses what was so truly impressive about him. Lincoln was all the things. He was compassionate, deliberate, fair, open-minded, and purposeful while being a politician. He was what we admire in a profession we believe to be filled exclusively with the opposite of that type of person. Principles and pragmatism are not at odds. Whether you live in the snake pit of Washington, D.C., work among the materialism of Wall Street, or grew up in a closed-minded small town, you can live well. Plenty of others have. August 8th. Start with where the world is. Do now what nature demands of you. Get right to it if that's in your power. Don't look around to see if people will know about it. Don't await the perfection of Plato's Republic, but be satisfied with even the smallest step forward and regard the outcome as a small thing. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, 9.29, 4. Have you ever heard the expression "don't let perfect be the enemy of good enough"? The idea is not to settle or compromise your standards, but rather not to become trapped by idealism. The community organizer Saul Alinsky opens his book Rules for Radicals with a pragmatic but inspiring articulation of that idea. As an organizer, I start from where the world is, as it is, not as I would like it to be. That we accept the world as it is does not in any sense weaken our desire to change it into what we believe it should be. It is necessary to begin where the world is if we are going to change it to what we think it should be. There is plenty that you could do right now, today, that would make the world a better place. There are plenty of small steps that, were you to take them, would help move things forward. Don't excuse yourself from doing them because the conditions aren't right or because a better opportunity might come along soon. Do what you can, now. And when you've done it, keep it in perspective, don't overblow the results. Shun both ego and excuse, before and after. August 9th. Stick with just the facts. Don't tell yourself anything more than what the initial impressions report. It's been reported to you that someone is speaking badly about you. This is the report. The report wasn't that you've been harmed. I see that my son is sick but not that his life is at risk. So always stay within your first impressions, and don't add to them in your head. This way nothing can happen to you. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, 8.49 at first, this can seem like the opposite of everything you've been taught. Don't we cultivate our minds and critical thinking skills precisely so we don't simply accept things at face value? Yes, most of the time. But sometimes this approach can be counterproductive. What a philosopher also has is the ability, as Nietzsche put it, to stop courageously, at the surface and see things in plain, objective form. Nothing more, nothing less. Yes, Stoics were superficial, he said, out of profundity. Today, while other people are getting carried away, that's what you're going to practice. A kind of straightforward pragmatism, seeing things as their initial impressions make them. August 10th. Perfection is the enemy of action. We don't abandon our pursuits because we despair of ever perfecting them. Epictetus, Discourses, 1.2.37 BP. Psychologists speak of cognitive distortions, exaggerated thinking patterns that have a destructive impact on the life of the patient. One of the most common is known as all or nothing thinking, also referred to as splitting. Examples of this include thoughts like, if you're not with me, you're against me. So and so is all good/bad. Because this wasn't a complete success, it is a total failure. This sort of extreme thinking is associated with depression and frustration. How could it not be? Perfectionism rarely begets perfection, only disappointment. Pragmatism has no such hang-ups. It'll take what it can get. That's what Epictetus is reminding us. We're never going to be perfect if there is even such a thing. We're human, after all. Our pursuits should be aimed at progress, however little that it's possible for us to make. August 11th. No time for theories, just results. When the problem arose for us whether habit or theory was better for getting virtue, if by theory is meant what teaches us correct conduct, and by habit we mean being accustomed to act according to this theory, Musonius thought habit to be more effective. Musonius Rufus, Lectures, 5.17.31, 32, 5.19.1, 2. As Hamlet says, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. There is no time to chop logic over whether our theories are correct. We're dealing with the real world here. What matters is how you're going to deal with this situation right in front of you and whether you're going to be able to move past it and on to the next one. That's not saying that anything goes, but we can't forget that although theories are clean and simple, situations rarely are. August 12th. Make the words your own. Many words have been spoken by Plato, Zeno, Chrysippus, Posidonius, and by a whole host of equally excellent Stoics. I'll tell you how people can prove their words to be their own by putting into practice what they've been preaching. Seneca, Oral Letters, 108.35, 38 one of the criticisms of Stoicism by modern translators and teachers is the amount of repetition. Marcus Aurelius, for example, has been dismissed by academics as not being original because his writing resembles that of other, earlier Stoics. This criticism misses the point. Even before Marcus's time, Seneca was well aware that there was a lot of borrowing and overlap among the philosophers. That's because real philosophers weren't concerned with authorship, only what worked. More important, they believed that what was said mattered less than what was done. And this is as true now as it was then. You're welcome to take all of the words of the great philosophers and use them to your own liking. They're dead, they don't mind. Feel free to tweak and edit and improve as you like. Adapt them to the real conditions of the real world. The way to prove that you truly understand what you speak and write, that you truly are original, is to put them into practice. Speak them with your actions more than anything else. August 13th. Take charge and end your troubles. You've endured countless troubles, all from not letting your ruling reason do the work it was made for. Enough already. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, 9.26. How many things you fear have actually come to pass? How many times has anxiety driven you to behave in a way you later regret? How many times have you let jealousy or frustration or greed lead you down a bad road? Letting our reason rule the day might seem like more work, but it saves us quite a bit of trouble. As Ben Franklin's proverb put it, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Your brain was designed to do this work. It was meant to separate what is important from what is senseless, to keep things in perspective, to only become troubled by that which is worth becoming troubled about. You only need to put it to use. August 14th. This isn't for fun. It's for life. Philosophy isn't a parlor trick or made for show. It's not concerned with words, but with facts. It's not employed for some pleasure before the day is spent, or to relieve the uneasiness of our leisure. It shapes and builds up the soul, it gives order to life, guides action, shows what should and shouldn't be done. It sits at the rudder steering our course as we vacillate in uncertainties. Without it, no one can live without fear or free from care. Countless things happen every hour that require advice, and such advice is to be sought out in philosophy. Seneca, Oral Letters, 16.3. Here is a story about Cato the Elder, whose great-grandson Cato the Younger became a towering figure in Roman life. One day Cato witnessed a fine oration from Carneades, a skeptic philosopher, who waxed poetically on the importance of justice. Yet the next day Cato found Carneades arguing passionately about the problems with justice, that it was merely a device invented by society to create order. Cato was aghast at this kind of philosopher, who treated such a precious topic like a debate where one would argue both sides of an issue purely for show. What on earth was the point? And so he lobbied the Senate to have Carneades sent back to Athens, where he could no longer corrupt the Roman youth with his rhetorical tricks. To a Stoic, the idea of idly discussing some issue, of believing or arguing two contradictory ideas, is an absurd waste of time, energy, and belief. As Seneca said, philosophy is not a fun trick. It's for use for life. August 15th. The supreme court of your mind. This can be swiftly taught in very few words. Virtue is the only good, there is no certain good without virtue, and virtue resides in our nobler part, which is the rational one. And what can this virtue be? True and steadfast judgment. For from this will arise every mental impulse, and by it every appearance that spurs our impulses will be rendered clear. Seneca, Oral Letters, 71.32. Think about someone you know who has character of granite. Why are they so dependable, trustworthy, excellent? Why do they have a sterling reputation? You might see a pattern: consistency. They are honest not only when it's convenient. They are not only there for you when it counts. The qualities that make them admirable come through in every action, arise with every mental impulse. Why do we revere people like Theodore Roosevelt, for example? It isn't because he was brave once, or courageous once, or tough once. It's because those qualities are shot through every one of the stories about him. When he was young and weak, he became a boxer. When he was younger and frail, he went to a gym in his home, every day, for hours on end. When he was shattered by the loss of his wife and mother on the same day, he went to the Badlands and herded cattle. And on and on. You become the sum of your actions, and as you do, what flows from that your impulses reflect the actions you've taken. Choose wisely. August 16. Anything can be an advantage just as the nature of rational things has given to each person their rational powers, so it also gives us this power just as nature turns to its own purpose any obstacle or any opposition, sets its place in the destined order, and co-opts it, so every rational person can convert any obstacle into the raw material for their own purpose. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, 8.35 at 5 feet 3 inches tall, Muggsy Bogues was the shortest player ever to play professional basketball. Throughout his career, he was snickered at, underestimated, and counted out. But Bogues succeeded by turning his height into the very thing that made him nationally known. Some people looked at his size as a curse, but he saw it as a blessing. He found the advantages contained within it. In fact, on the court small size has many advantages: speed and quickness, the ability to steal the ball from unsuspecting, and significantly taller, players, to say nothing of the fact that players just plain underestimated him. Could this approach not be useful in your life? What things do you think have been holding you back that, in fact, can be a hidden source of strength? August 17. The buck stops here, for nothing outside my reasoned choice can hinder or harm it. My reasoned choice alone can do this to itself. If we would lean this way whenever we fail, and would blame only ourselves and remember that nothing but opinion is the cause of a troubled mind and uneasiness, then by God, I swear we would be making progress. Epictetus, Discourses, 3.19.2, 3 Tode, see if you can go without blaming a single person or single thing. Someone messes up your instructions, it's on you for expecting anything different. Someone says something rude, it's your sensitivity that interpreted their remark this way. Your stock portfolio takes a big loss, what did you expect making such a big bet? Why are you checking the market day to day anyway? Whatever it is, however bad it may be, see whether you can make it a whole day, laying it all on your reasoned choice. If you can't make it for a day, see if you can make it for an hour. If not for an hour, then for 10 minutes. Start where you need to. Even 1 minute without playing the blame game is progress in the art of living. August 18. Only fools rush in. A good person is invincible, for they don't rush into contests in which they aren't the strongest. If you want their property, take it, take also their staff, profession, and body. But you will never compel what they set out for, nor trap them in what they would avoid. For the only contest the good person enters is that of their own reasoned choice. How can such a person not be invincible? Epictetus, Discourses, 3.6.5, 7 of the most fundamental principles of martial arts is that strength should not go against strength. That is, don't try to beat your opponent where they are strongest. But that's exactly what we do when we try to undertake some impossible task we haven't bothered to think through. Or we let someone put us on the spot. Or we say yes to everything that comes our way. Some people think that choosing your battles is weak or calculating. How could reducing the amount of times we fail or minimizing the number of needless injuries inflicted upon us be weak? How is that a bad thing? As the saying goes, discretion is the better part of valor. The Stoics call it reasoned choice. That means be reasonable. Think hard before choosing, and make yourself unbeatable. August 19. Corralling the unnecessary. It is said that if you would have peace of mind, busy yourself with little. But wouldn't a better saying be do what you must and as required of a rational being created for public life? For this brings not only the peace of mind of doing few things, but the greater peace of doing them well. Since the vast majority of our words and actions are unnecessary, corralling them will create an abundance of leisure and tranquility. As a result, we shouldn't forget at each moment to ask, is this one of the unnecessary things? But we must corral not only unnecessary actions but unnecessary thoughts, too, so needless acts don't tag along after them. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, 4.24 He Stoics were not monks. They didn't retreat to the sanctuary of a monastery or a temple. They were politicians, businessmen, soldiers, artists. They practiced their philosophy amid the busyness of life just as you are attempting to do. The key to accomplishing that is to ruthlessly expunge the inessential from our lives. What vanity obligates us to do, what greed signs us up for, what ill discipline adds to our plate, what a lack of courage prevents us from saying no to. All of this we must cut, cut, cut. August 20th. Where it counts inwardly, we ought to be different in every respect, but our outward dress should blend in with the crowd. Seneca, M. Oral Letters, 5.2. Diogenes the Cynic was a controversial philosopher who wandered the streets like a homeless person. A few thousand years later, his utterances still make us think. But if most of us had seen him at the time, we'd have thought, who is that crazy guy? It's tempting to take philosophy to extremes, but who does that serve? In fact, rejection of the basics of society alienates other people, even threatens them. More important, outward transformation in our clothes, in our cars, in our grooming might feel important but is superficial compared with the inward change. That's the change that only we know about. August 21st. Don't be miserable in advance. It's ruinous for the soul to be anxious about the future and miserable in advance of misery, engulfed by anxiety that the things it desires might remain its own until the very end. For such a soul will never be at rest by longing for things to come. It will lose the ability to enjoy present things. Seneca, M. Oral Letters, 98.5b, 6at. The way we nervously worry about some looming bad news is strange if you think about it. By definition, the waiting means it hasn't happened yet, so that feeling bad in advance is totally voluntary. But that's what we do, chewing our nails, feeling sick to our stomachs, rudely brushing aside the people around us. Why? Because something bad might occur soon. The pragmatist, the person of action, is too busy to waste time on such silliness. The pragmatist can't worry about every possible outcome in advance. Think about it. Best case scenario: if the news turns out to be better than expected, all this time was wasted with needless fear. Worst case scenario: we were miserable for extra time, by choice. And what better use could you make of that time? A day that could be your last. You want to spend it in worry? In what other area could you make some progress while others might be sitting on the edges of their seat, passively awaiting some fate? Let the news come when it does. Be too busy working to care. August 22nd. Don't sweat the small stuff. It is essential for you to remember that the attention you give to any action should be in due proportion to its worth, for then you won't tire and give up, if you aren't busying yourself with lesser things beyond what should be allowed. Marcus Aurelius, M. Meditations, 4.32 bin 1997, a psychotherapist named Richard Carlson published a book called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, and it's all small stuff. It quickly became one of the fastest-selling books of all time and spent years on the bestseller lists, ultimately selling millions of copies in many languages. Whether you read the book or not, Carlson's pithy articulation of this timeless idea is worth remembering. Even Cornelius Fronto, Marcus Aurelius's rhetoric teacher, would have thought it a superior way of expressing the wisdom his student attempted in the quote above. They both say the same thing: don't spend your time, the most valuable and least renewable of all your resources, on the things that don't matter. What about the things that don't matter but you're absolutely obligated to do? Well, spend as little time and worry on them as possible. If you give things more time and energy than they deserve, they're no longer lesser things. You've made them important by the life you've spent on them. And sadly, you've made the important things, your family, your health, your true commitments, less so as a result of what you've stolen from them. August 23rd. It's in your self-interest, therefore, explain why a wise person shouldn't get drunk, not with words, but by the facts of its ugliness and offensiveness. It's most easy to prove that so-called pleasures, when they go beyond proper measure, are but punishments. Seneca, M. Oral Letters, 83.27 is. There a less effective technique to persuading people to do something than haranguing them? Is there anything that turns people off more than abstract notions? That's why the Stoics don't say, Stop doing this, it's a sin. Instead they say, don't do this because it will make you miserable. They don't say, pleasure isn't pleasurable. They say, endless pleasure becomes its own form of punishment. Their methods of persuasion hew the line in the 48 laws of power, appeal to people's self-interest, never to their mercy or gratitude. If you find yourself trying to persuade someone to change or do something differently, remember what an effective lever self-interest is. It's not that this or that is bad, it's that it is in their best interest to do it a different way. And show them, don't moralize. And what happens when you apply this way of thinking to your own behavior? August 24, pillage from all sources. I'll never be ashamed to quote a bad writer with a good saying. Seneca, On Tranquility of Mind, 11.80. Of the striking things about Seneca's letters and essays is how often he quotes the philosopher Epicurus. Why is that strange? Because Stoicism and Epicureanism are supposed to be diametrically opposed philosophies. In reality, the differences, while significant, tend to be overblown. But this is true to form for Seneca. He was looking for wisdom, period. It didn't matter where it came from. This is something that a lot of fundamentalists in religion, philosophy, anything seem to miss. Who cares whether some bit of wisdom is from a Stoic? Who cares whether it perfectly jibes with Stoicism? What matters is whether it makes your life better, whether it makes you better. What wisdom or help would you be able to find today if you stopped caring about affiliations and reputations? How much more could you see if you just focused on merit? August 25. Respect the past, but be open to the future. Won't you be walking in your predecessors' footsteps? I surely will use the older path, but if I find a shorter and smoother way, I'll blaze a trail there. The ones who pioneered these paths aren't our masters, but our guides. Truth stands open to everyone, it hasn't been monopolized. Seneca, M. Oral Letters, 33.11. Traditions are often time-tested best practices for doing something. But remember that today's conservative ideas were once controversial, cutting-edge, and innovative. This is why we can't be afraid to experiment with new ideas. In Seneca's case, he might be embracing some new philosophical insight that improves on the writing of Zeno or Cleanthes. In our case, perhaps a breakthrough in psychology improves on the writing of Seneca or Marcus Aurelius. Or perhaps we have a breakthrough of our own. If these ideas are true and better, embrace them, use them. You don't need to be a prisoner of dead old men who stopped learning 2,000 years ago. August 26. Seeking out shipwrecks. I was shipwrecked before I even boarded. The journey showed me this: how much of what we have is unnecessary, and how easily we can decide to rid ourselves of these things whenever it's necessary, never suffering the loss. Seneca, M. Oral Letters, 87.1. Zeno, widely considered to be the founder of the school of Stoicism, was a merchant before he was a philosopher. On a voyage between Phoenicia and Piraeus, his ship sank along with its cargo. Zeno ended up in Athens, and while visiting a bookstore he was introduced to the philosophy of Socrates and, later, an Athenian philosopher named Crates. These influences drastically changed the course of his life, leading him to develop the thinking and principles that we now know as Stoicism. According to the ancient biographer Diogenes Laertius, Zeno joked, "Now that I've suffered shipwreck, I'm on a good journey," or according to another account, "You've done well, Fortune, driving me thus to philosophy," he reportedly said. The Stoics weren't being hypothetical when they said we ought to act with the reverse clause, and that even the most unfortunate events can turn out to be for the best. The entire philosophy is founded on that idea. August 27. Laugh, or cry. Heraclitus would shed tears whenever he went out in public. Democritus laughed. One saw the whole as a parade of miseries, the other of follies. And so, we should take a lighter view of things and bear them with an easy spirit, for it is more human to laugh at life than to lament it. Seneca, On Tranquility of Mind, 15.2. Is this observation the origin of that famous expression about frustrating news: "I don't know whether to laugh or cry"? The Stoics saw little purpose in getting angry or sad about things that are indifferent to our feelings. Especially when those feelings end up making us feel worse. It's also another bit of evidence that the Stoics were hardly some depressing, bitter group of old men. Even when things were really bad, when the world made them want to weep in despair or rage, they chose to laugh about it. Like Democritus, we can make that same choice. There is more humor than hate to be found in just about every situation. And at least humor is productive, making things less heavy, not more so. August 28, the opulent Stoic, the founder of the universe, who assigned to us the laws of life, provided that we should live well, but not in luxury. Everything needed for our well-being is right before us, whereas what luxury requires is gathered by many miseries and anxieties. Let us use this gift of nature and count it among the greatest things. Seneca, M. Oral Letters, 119.15b. Even in his own time, Seneca was criticized for preaching Stoic virtues while accumulating one of the largest fortunes in Rome. Seneca was so rich that some historians speculate that major loans he made to the inhabitants of what is now Britain caused what became a horrifically brutal uprising there. His critics' derisive nickname for him was the opulent Stoic. Seneca's response to this criticism is pretty simple: he might have wealth, but he didn't need it. He wasn't dependent on it or addicted to it. Nor, despite his large bank account, was he considered to be anything close to Rome's most lavish spenders and pleasure hunters. Whether his rationalization was true or not, or whether he was a tad hypocritical, his is a decent prescription for navigating today's materialistic and wealth-driven society. This is the pragmatic instead of the moralistic approach to wealth. We can still live well without becoming slaves to luxury. And we don't need to make decisions that force us to continue to work and drift further from study and contemplation in order to get more money to pay for the things we don't need. There is no rule that says financial success must mean that you live beyond your means. Remember, humans can be happy with very little. August 29, want nothing equals have everything. No person has the power to have everything they want, but it is in their power not to want what they don't have, and to cheerfully put to good use what they do have. Seneca, M. Oral Letters, 123.3. Is there a person so rich that there is literally nothing they can't afford? Surely there isn't. Even the richest people regularly fail in their attempts to buy elections, to purchase respect, class, love, and any number of other things that are not for sale. If obscene wealth will never get you everything you want, is that the end of it? Or is there another way to solve for that equation? To the Stoics, there is, by changing what it is that you want. By changing how you think, you'll manage to get it. John D. Rockefeller, who was as rich as they come, believed that a man's wealth must be determined by the relation of his desires and expenditures to his income. If he feels rich on $10 and has everything he desires, he really is rich. Today, you could try to increase your wealth, or you could take a shortcut and just want less. August 30, when you feel lazy, anything that must yet be done, virtue can do with courage and promptness. For anyone would call it a sign of foolishness for one to undertake a task with a lazy and begrudging spirit, or to push the body in one direction and the mind in another, to be torn apart by wildly divergent impulses. Seneca, M. Oral Letters, 31.b, 32. If you start something and right away feel yourself getting lazy and irritated, first ask yourself, why am I doing this? If it really is a necessity, ask yourself, what's behind my reluctance? Fear? Spite? Fatigue? Don't forge ahead hoping that someone will come along and relieve you of this task you don't want to do. Or that someone else will suddenly explain why what you're doing matters. Don't be the person who says yes with their mouth but no with their actions. Steve Jobs told Businessweek in 2005, only midway through Apple's stunning rise to becoming one of the world's most valuable companies, quality is much better than quantity. One home run is much better than two doubles. August 31, consider your failings too. Whenever you take offense at someone's wrongdoing, immediately turn to your own similar failings, such as seeing money as good, or pleasure, or a little fame, whatever form it takes. By thinking on this, you'll quickly forget your anger, considering also what compels them, for what else could they do? Or, if you are able, remove their compulsion. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, 10.30. Earlier we were reminded of Socrates' tolerant belief that no one does wrong on purpose. The clearest proof of that hypothesis? All the times we did wrong without malice or intention. Remember them? The time you were rude because you hadn't slept in 2 days. The time you acted on bad information. The time you got carried away, forgot, didn't understand. The list goes on and on. This is why it is so important not to write people off or brand them as enemies. Be as forgiving of them as you are of yourself. Cut them the same slack you would for yourself so that you can continue to work with them and make use of their talents.